Hello, I'm Robin and welcome to Multimusic Technology. Today we're exploring the West Pest. The West Pest is, of course, Cre8audio's counterpart to the East Beast, a synthesizer I've already reviewed, which is buttery smooth with that fantastic filter there in the middle. So what is it that the West Pest offers that the East Beast does not? Well, the clue is kind of in the name, and we shouldn't get distracted by the beast and pest side of things, because the East Beast is far from beastly and the West Pest is nowhere near any kind of pest. But the first part of the name, the East and the West, refers to East Coast synthesis and West Coast synthesis. Does it matter what that is? No, we don't really care anymore because we mix all of these things together, but it does give you some insight into the sort of stuff that's going to be involved in that synthesizer. So with East Coast, you're looking at filters, VCAs, you're looking at subtractive synthesis from Moog, from Arp, that kind of traditional musical form of synthesizer. On the West Coast we have Buchla and Surge, who are into a more esoteric, fanciful and slightly bizarre way of synthesis, and that's what we find in the West Pest. In reality, all we're really talking about is wavefolding. So folding waves to generate harmonics and more sound, rather than filtering and taking away harmonics like you do on the East Coast. But there's other differences too, in that you don't really have envelopes in the same way on the West Pest as you do on the East Beast. And instead we have this really fascinating dynamics controller, which is a take on the low pass gate, which is fundamental to the Buchla sound. And it will be the combination of wavefolding on the nice big knob here and the dynamics controller, which is going to give the West Pest its quite individual and unique sound. While there are, of course, similarities between all forms of synthesis, this is very different. It has a different edge to it. It has a feeling that it's about to roll off and explode into other places. It has a grittiness, it has an edginess, it has a boldness perhaps that brightly penetrates through the sound. It's not that covering in butter or getting oiled up like you were on the East Beast. No. This is slightly more dangerous, slightly more adventurous, perhaps. And the interesting thing I find about that is that it takes me away from doing the same stuff that I would normally do on any other synthesizer, because I'm looking for difference. I'm looking for odd ways of doing things, new sorts of sounds that I haven't fully explored before. On the East Beast, I kind of spend my time doing the same thing, the familiar thing, the thing that I like. You know, I instantly find things that I can hook into. I can create an awesome bass line, get super in on that filter and go, yeah, this is it, man. This is techno. I'm doing it. I'm making music. With the West Pest, it's a slightly different journey, and you start to explore things differently, and the knobs that are labelled as things that you think they are labelled as aren't necessarily doing the thing that you thought the label implied that the thing that they would be doing is actually what they're doing. And that's always exciting. But at the same time, it's not radical and out there, man. It's not going to take you on some kind of weird trip into psychedelic heaven. Well, you could do that, but it's not going to be the fault of the synthesizer. And so there's plenty of familiar territory within here, and sounds that are easily within your grasp that you could fit in to any system, in any place. And it's certainly very interesting to run the two together, as I'll do, I imagine, at the end of this video. But for the moment, let's pull you in, let's take off any reverb or delay, and just get stuck in to exactly what's going on inside the West Pest. The West Pest then, as you can see, there's kind of three sections. There's the oscillator, waveform contour, dynamics controller. There's also an LFO. Of course, you've got the keyboard at the bottom, which has a sequencer and arpeggiator built in. There is the multi-function sort of weirdo modulator, which comes from the East Beast. And of course, you've got all of this patching stuff over here, which you can get into if you wish. If you're unfamiliar with West Coast synthesis, then it will seem odd, is the word, because there's always something going on. It's not running straightforward oscillator waveform through a filter, through a VCA that you may be more familiar with. This is messing stuff about kind of at every stage, and it's in fact quite difficult to get a simple waveform out. Everything is always being contoured and changed and controlled, and that gives it this sound which is instantly West Coast as opposed to sounding like any other sort of synthesizer. It has a woodiness to it. It has an organic nature to it. It has a slap, almost like there's a skin. There's a slap that's going on, some kind of percussive skin element on a drum. But that, of course, changes depending on your waveform, depending on the amount of folding that you're doing, depending on the sort of thing you're doing with the dynamics controller, depending on how you're moving that changes, and whether you've got the resonance up or down and how much modulation is going in. So it's always under stress, it's always being pushed, manipulated, and outputting a slightly strange and yet familiar and graspable tone. So over on the oscillator, it's the same oscillator as you found in the East Beast, but in this one you won't find a square wave, and that's because the next stage is wave folding, and you can't fold a square. Really, it just remains a square. It doesn't make any sense. But with sine waves, triangle waves, sawtooth waves, as you fold one bit atop of another, it generates these harmonics, which are very, very interesting. So if you start off with a basic sine wave that we've got here, there's hardly anything there. But as we turn the fold knob, it very quickly gets interesting. Now, it would be nice if we could get to listen to that over time as opposed to me keep hitting a button. So let's move over to the dynamics controller a little bit and whack the sustain up. Now the sustain does more than sustain. It also sort of pushes and adds in some nice saturation. Let's keep it about there, and then I can move through that folding a little bit more deliberately. Now that is just so smooth, so lovely. Now there is a resonance control, which if we put that half up, you can hear how that's starting to emphasize some of the harmonics as it goes through. Flattens them out. Emphasizes all the way up to the top. And then if you push the sustain, it gives you a whole bunch of further edges to deal with. So from something really soft to something really quite bitey. Let's have a quick look at the wavefolding on my scope here. So we've still got the sine wave, I've got the resonance down, got the sustain up a little bit so that we can hear the droning, and I've got the output of the fold out, so it's not going through the dynamics controller, it's purely the wavefolding that we're seeing. So here's our sine wave to some degree, then as we pull this in, you can see what happens and why that sound changes. If I plug that into the main output, We should also be able to see how the resonance gets involved in that, but now we won't be able to hear it. So there's the wave folding. As I put the resonance in, you can see how it pushes on those peaks. Bring the resonance down. See what's happening? And as I introduce some more sustain, it's acting as an amplifier. Now, while you can turn this knob all day, just enjoying this, there are more things to be done. So, let's have a look. You've got different waveforms. You can select them here. I mean, this entire panel down the bottom here gives you kind of two options. You've got a yellow button, in brackets here because the button isn't actually yellow. But let's assume this is a yellow button, and that gives us access to all of the yellow writing here. The white button here, which is white, bracketed in white to tell us that it's white, is what controls the white writing. And this gives us a few options: light changing, oscillator wave. So yellow button, white, yellow button, oscillator wave allows us to step through the different waveforms. So now we're on to more of a triangle waveform. And then a sawtooth. And then you've got combinations, sine and triangle together. Or with the sawtooth. Triangle and sawtooth. And then finally you stick all three together and it generates noise. It's not because the three of them combined generates noise, it's that Cre8audio have decided to make this the noise one. So you'll find there is a tone in there. But it's surrounded by quite a nice, noisy, sweepably fabulous vibe. Right, let's move our attention to the dynamics controller, because this is something a little bit special. Now, if you're familiar with West Coast synthesis, then you might know all about low-pass gates. Low-pass gates are these brilliant idea that uses light in order to open a gate to allow sound through. It uses an LED which lights up a sensor, and that decay of the light vanishing gives this very organic feel to a low-pass gate. It gives it that boing. That boing, do you know what I mean? That's not it. Turn the sustain off. It's the boing. That slap, that woodenness, that percussive sound. That's very much about a low pass gate. It has this organic nature because it's using light and sort of real things to affect the way things open and close. Now, Pittsburgh Modular thought to themselves, we're not going to have any of that in here. Oh no, we're going to devise our own thing. Because there are pros and cons of low pass gates. The biggest con being you have no real control over the release time, over the length of that sound. It's always of this sort of nature. So Pittsburgh, working with Cre8audio within the West Pest, decided to develop something called the Dynamics Controller. Now, I think this was first seen on the Waveforms Voltage Lab, their experimental thing from a couple of years ago. But they've been working on this, and the idea is to create a more versatile dynamic system which works like a low-pass gate but gives you more. That more being the ability to release the sound. So you now have this extendable release, and it's also very repeatable, because often in low pass gates they end up sort of being different. They have their own character from synthesizer to synthesizer, from module to module, from low pass gate to low pass gate, and that can give you a sense of individuality, but it's also doesn't help if you're trying to repeat something. So with the dynamics controller, it's much more under your control. You can set it and it will be the same every time. It's predictable. And this also brings us into our sustain, because we can use sustain here to hold a note, to hold that gate open before you hit that release. Whereas typically a low pass gate is a triggerable event. It happens and then you've got a small amount of release as that light disappears, and that's your lot. But within the dynamics controller you have the ability to hold notes, and you have that control over release at the end. Now something you might notice that there's no defined envelope. You have sustain and release, which seem very familiar from regular ADSR envelopes, but there's no attack, there's no decay stage. It's interesting. You always have this front end which has this bite to it, this drum to it, this slap to it, as I keep going on about. And you may be thinking, but hang on, where's my attack? I like a nice long attack. Well then in that case you need a different synthesizer, because this is all about those transients at the front. Let me run something to see whether we can experience that a little bit. I love the way it digs. It kind of digs into that sound, particularly lower down. Then you can just push that release out there. But somehow it still retains that natural sound, that organic nature, that bang that's going on. It feels like somebody's playing an instrument even though it's electronic. You do have some control over the gate length down here. Which brings in more of that sustain. Now the system here for selecting stuff works on this completely mysterious form of lights which tell you what you're on. You can find your way through it. Don't see it as a barrier to what you're trying to do. So as I'm changing gate length, you'll see that these lights here change. So this means the very shortest sound, slightly longer, and so on, until you get to the highest number. But it's really interesting how this sustain does more than just saturates or pushes. There's some really interesting timbre changes going on in there as you pull that sustain back from the edge. Then of course you can start introducing an LFO. So we've got an LFO here, which goes from very, very, very slow up to a kind of a medium flash, but then you've got another range that you can send it to where it goes up to kind of audio rate and back down again. So if we make that relatively slow moving, we could push that into the folding just to get that moving, which is delicious. You can also introduce that LFO to the pitch of the oscillator. You want to up that to more of an audio rate. You can make some strangely FM noises. You can also put the LFO into the release. The last control on the front I've got is glide. One of my favourite features of both these beasts in the West Pest is the ability to randomise the waveform, which you can do just here. Now on every step we're getting a different randomly selected waveform. And it adds this fabulous sense of change. The sequencer and arpeggiator, like on the East Beast, are very, very simple and just nicely do the job. You turn it on, whatever it is. I think it's probably a sequence because this is not flashing, but I can clear it and then I can just stick a note in. And I can add another note and keep going until that's what I want it to be. I can transpose. I can then smooth that into an arpeggiator. Then actually swap that back into a sequencer and then turn on transpose again. Turn off transpose and add more notes to it. So it's remarkably versatile, even though it's quite simple, and you have to get used to these lights. Are they on? Are they off? If it's flashing, it generally means it's bracketed. If it's solid, then it means it's the thing underneath, at least as far as I can work out. So we're currently on sequencer mode. So let's put in a couple of notes. Because there has this other weird function. When you've got swing and you've got gate length and randomization, which is quite nice, but it has this ability to self-generate, which is weird and interesting. I haven't quite wrapped my head around it, other than it goes, oh my goodness. So you just set that going and it will start generating its own sequences based on who knows what. And it does something for a little while and then it changes. Just really nice. You can also save patterns, load patterns, things like that on the fly. You've got choices of clock source, you've got pitch bend range, and the ability to effect change via the patch bay over here. Let's have a look at the multi-engine. Now the multi-modulation thing is another way of adding further modulation to the system from this kind of digital whizziness they've got in the background. It offers you 4 different things. You can patch in MIDI controls, so any kind of CC control number, you can patch that in and use that to control something. It has a secondary LFO, it has a randomization, and it also does actually have an envelope. Now the envelope is for modulating things rather than controlling the dynamics. But let me show you what I mean. So this is the multi-out here. And you select the function with the yellow button and it shows you here in brackets what that function is. So MIDI, I don't have any MIDI plugged in, so I'm not going to worry about that. You've got MIDI in and out on the West Pest, like with the East Beast, which turns this into a MIDI to CV converter. But I'm not going to go into that in this particular video. So the next option is an LFO. And now I can take this LFO and plug it into the fold modulation. And now it's being controlled by this envelope, not the LFO here. I can change that as much as I like. Now the LFO's timing is timed to the clock. And using the Y button you can set multiples or divisions of that. I can then move it on to random. Which has the same ability to change its timing. And then finally you've got envelope, which is only going to be appropriate, of course, if I press anything. And again, I can change the length of that. So the West Pest then, what do you think of that? Interesting? Yeah, different. It doesn't make you fall into that usual trap of techno and standard filter, low pass filter sounds that sort of becomes our default setting whenever we're dealing with synthesis. No, this invites something else. It's pulling at you in different ways. It's more bingy, more bongy at the same time as being slightly more clangy, perhaps. But that's because it's bringing out these different tones, these solid, these slaps, these pats. Although utilising the envelope like you can from the multi, it does offer up a filteresque type of experience. And this is the thing with it, is that I keep finding new tones, new ways of looking at it. Yeah, with a subtractive synthesizer, I can dial it in to be exactly what I think and know it will be, and enjoy that, very much enjoy that. With West Pest, I'm starting to learn its deliberate nature. I'm starting to learn its intention, but it's not automatic to me. So I'm having to experiment, having to explore a bit more, which is both interesting and slightly bewildering, I suppose. But it does make you want to play. You want to keep folding. You're never quite happy with where it is you folded it to. And you just want that to change. There's such a wide variety of sounds that you can pull out of it, and in ways that you don't expect. Well, I think overall Cre8audio and Pittsburgh Modular have put together a couple of fantastic little synthesizers. They have distinct flavors, distinct differences. So, you know, when the first comment comes up that says, so which one should I get? Should I get the West Pest or the East Beast? Which one should I get? That's not an easy question to answer, because they are different, fundamentally so. If you want that filtered techno sound, that bassline sound, then the East Beast is where you need to be fishing. Whereas if you want something bongier, more fascinating, but potentially harder to bend to your will, then give the West Pest a go. There's no doubt that Pittsburgh Modular have brought a lot to the table in their contribution to this. If you're wondering what the relationship is, well, they're just a bunch of mates having a bit of a laugh together, enjoying putting together Synthesizers. Pittsburgh Modular have been working in this business for a long time and have honed things like their oscillators are superb. The dynamics controller on this is excellent through years of working that out. The filter on the East Beast is just sublime. So it's that level of quality that Pittsburgh Modular have brought to this situation. Cre8audio, from their point of view, they bring in the production side, the size, the reach, the creative possibilities, and an enabling Pittsburgh Modular to do their best work. That's ultimately how these two things come together. And for street prices around $249 on both of these, they're affordable. I mean, they're worth the money. You know, they're a little bit extra perhaps than other competitors, but you are getting a superb level of engineering within here. I mean, okay, it's a plastic case, yeah, but you can also pull it out, drop it into your Eurorack, which is always a nice thing. And that brings you this keyboard to the patch bay to then patching into other things and could become a controller within your Eurorack. And sure, I probably feel more comfortable with the East Beast because that's more of the place where I'm familiar with, the place that I play most often. But this has really opened my eyes and my ears to the sort of difference you can get through this. It can bring a whole nother flavour in, which of course makes you want to run the two together. Should you do that? Oh yeah. I think you probably should.